Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the fourth episode of the Soft Edges podcast. I am Lucy, and I'm here today with my lovely co-host, as per usual, Mais Rukel. How are you doing, Mais?
Hi, Lucy. I'm great. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm very excited, as per usual. I'm looking forward to what this episode is going to bring our listeners, because honestly, it's a lot of chapters, but they're all so amazing and interesting.
Exactly. And I'm also so looking forward to just chill and discuss these chapters with you because, well, I've been tackling a never-ending to-do list lately. And I must say, I'm a bit embarrassed by that because, I really value the message of the NAP ministry of Trisha Hersey. And she's been encouraging us to lay our asses down and not do much after a year of fucking global pandemic and to have a slow start to 2021. But look at me, I'm living by a checklist, like that meme I sent you, I wake up, check, breakfast, check.
And here you are literally drowning in lists of tasks daily.
Yeah, no, but really, once I'm done with all of this list, I will just really be much more selective about what I put on my plate.
As you should.
It gets overwhelming really fast.
As you should. You should never feel overwhelmed. You should always have a nice pace, your own rhythm, and everything should feel good.
Absolutely. I mean, just like Brown also said in the beginning, our no's make way for our yes. So I will just practice that much more often before I say yes to everything that comes my way.
Exactly. You need to rest your ass.
Absolutely. But I'm really excited. Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
Let's do it.
Let's get to it.
So in this episode, we're going to continue our journey through the magnificent book Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Maree Brown, and specifically section number 3 titled A Circle of Sex. So I am so excited about this because, as my lovely co-host already knows, sex is one of my all-time favorite topics to talk about and learn about, meaning I am always and forever will be eager to let loose and explore new perspectives on it. So let's dive right in, all puns intended.
Love it.
Wonderful. So the first chapter we're going to talk about is titled Conversation with a Sex Toy. And it's a short essay written by Adrienne Maree Brown. And basically, she has a brief conversation with one of her favorite sex toys, which just so happens to be called the womanizer. And actually, she points out herself how the name choice is kind of unfortunate, considering the stark contrast between the connotations that there are behind this specific word and what the toy actually does for self-pleasure, discovery, and intimate practices, for example. I would say that for me, I don't know about you, but the word womanizer has quite a negative connotation related to maybe not so pleasurable experiences that I've had, particularly with men I dated or hooked up with in the past. So I tend to see it as a word which is used to praise men who have lots of sexual conquests and/or who play their sexual or romantic partners. And by play, I mean often being dishonest, manipulative, careless, and so on, etc., etc. However, the toy womanizer had a quite opposite role, in my opinion, I think. But I really liked this conversation that they had together. I love saying that because it's literally between a human and an object.
Yeah.
I think the womanizer
was hilarious.
Yeah, so funny. And I think the womanizer was so well spoken.
Yeah. Definitely.
So it's quite short, but it's full of great input, I think. Specifically, I love how they reflect on pleasure and its power, but also the way that it's taught, or rather not taught. For instance, Adrienne Maree Brown points out how she wishes that, quote, sex education was actually much more focused on what pleasure feels like, getting to know the sensual and sexual pleasures of our bodies before we share them with others, and getting to know the distinct energy between yes and no, end quote. What do you think about that?
That information is obviously life-changing and life-saving whenever you receive it. And receiving it as early as possible would have been amazing for everyone, I think. I agree with Brown. I wish that as well. I wish sex education was much more focused on what pleasure feels like and about the distinction between a genuine yes and no, and how do we locate that in our body, in our mind, in our guts, and then to act on that as well. It just makes perfect sense to me, and it's yet another reminder to me that the means of oppression are really illogical. Like preventing such sex education is just cruel and doesn't make any sense. Like it makes sense for their own agenda, but
exactly.
It's just it's clear as daylight to me that healing makes perfect sense and harm makes none. So it's really sad that sex education is so limited and it doesn't center around pleasure. And consent also, by the way.
And consent, absolutely. I think it's such a pity that it focuses more on the negative and frowned upon consequences of pleasure, for example. That's most of sex education classes that I've heard about. I don't even consider what we have now as sex education as an education, quote unquote, you know?
Yeah, I know. And isn't it so strange that such a conversation can take place between a person and a sex toy, but not between like leading educators or between like leading politicians who are creating these agendas, you know?
Exactly. Oh my God.
It's so strange to me.
It's so weird. Yeah. Maybe these politicians and power forces, power people should talk to their own sex toys, if they have any.
Yeah, I hope they do. It doesn't seem like it.
No, it doesn't seem like it. If they did, they would be much more relaxed. Yeah. But actually, I was curious, what was your experience of sex education, if you had any, and what is your relationship to sex toys?
The sex education, quote unquote, by the way, that I received, quote unquote, at school was basically the typical situation where they divided the class between girls and boys, which was already really problematic, and then gave girls pads and boys condoms, the fuck, right? And
oh
basically, like, that's it.
Not gendered at all.
But as I also mentioned before in one of our episodes, that my father really tried, and he did his best in his own way, and I really do appreciate that. But I've mostly learned by myself or from friends who were more knowledgeable than I was back then, and thankfully I was spared from a lot of trouble, but perhaps I could have used less antibiotics for bladder infections if I had known certain things better.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yes, and sex toys, definitely. It's an area that I want to discover further and can't wait to do it soon. But I've mostly used sex products for practical reasons, but so then the question is like, what is not practical about pleasure, right? That's also something.
True.
What I mean is, for example, when anal sex was difficult for me, I used butt plugs to ease my pain and relieve my muscles and such, you know what I mean? It was a means to an end, but it wasn't there to advance my pleasure directly, or like directly using it for the pleasure. And that's something I want to discover and do much more often.
Yeah, that's interesting. You definitely should. Although I totally understand also the practicality of sex toys. As you said, they can be used as tool to facilitate sexual intercourse. But I think it's also important to expand on that use and actually take their full potential and make it your own.
Absolutely. That's really true.
Yeah.
I would have loved one like this womanizer that Brown has. In a sense, I mean, like this character the sex toy has is just so hilarious to me. Like when Brown posed her first question to it, it said like, "I didn't know you knew how to put words into coherent sentences." Stop it.
That was so funny. It was such a fun conversation.
Was so funny. That was so funny. I know. But also, like, for example, with sex toys, like Brown also says, sometimes that she wishes that, that was the womanizer saying it, that they wish they knew more about pace and foreplay, that there's no romance or something. And maybe partly that's really true. In my experience as well, for example, like, I never saw them as a tool to facilitate some kind of a foreplay with me when I'm alone with it, not with a partner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, but actually, when I use, for example, a dildo or something, I could use the whole lubrication process into a foreplay, maybe. I can turn the whole lubrication process into a foreplay with nice lighting and music, creating a sexy ambience or something, right?
Yeah, that's so true. Definitely. Yeah, that's something to experiment with.
Yeah, exactly. And on the other hand, maybe it is nice that the sex toys center the agency in ourselves only. And just like it's mentioned in the text also, that it gives a kind of healing without having to negotiate with someone else so much, right?
Yeah.
What about you? Your experience with sex education or the sex toys?
Well, for sex education in the, let's say, traditional term of like sex ed classes at school, I honestly don't remember even having a proper one. I think once in biology class we had like the talk about what sex is and how you get pregnant and how you shouldn't get pregnant and stuff like that, and how it works down there, and that was it. That was one class, maybe when I was something like 13 years old.
Yeah.
And then never again. So that was the extent of my sex education when it comes to more, I don't know, school related education. But outside of that, of course, I've had my own sexual education that I pursued on my own, and that worked sometimes, and sometimes it didn't. But you know, it comes with the territory, and it was fun to experiment and to learn that way. Although I wish I could have had a little bit more guidance and support at the start. I think that would have been great.
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah. But you know, it's in the past now. Whatever.
Exactly.
I'm a pro now. And when it comes to sex toys, I've actually never used any. But I'm very, very curious about it, and I actually really want to purchase some really nice, lovely sex toys and experiment with them. I'm super open with it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, mainly with myself, though. I'm not sure yet if I would want to use sex toys during a session with my lover. But that's something that could come down the road. But first, I want to experiment with myself and have a one-on-one with my sex toys, let's say, to discover even more about my own pleasure practices, my preferences, what I don't like, what truly gets me off, what turns me on to a point of, you know, almost fainting, or maybe who just turns the pleasure right off when it happens. So yeah, that's what I want to do with it.
Sounds amazing, Lucy. I love it. Wow.
Yeah.
Really exciting.
I hope I can do it soon. I've been looking. If any of our listeners has good recommendations, please hit us up. We're open to suggestions and full-on reviews.
I love that. Yeah, I think it'll be great. It'll be great, Lucy. Can't wait for your feedback afterwards.
Oh, yes. You know I will make a whole spreadsheet about my experiences.
I know. A PowerPoint presentation. Yeah. And the
color
video.
Coded and everything. Yeah. A YouTube video. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
But going back to the chapter, the womanizer also elaborates on the power potential of pleasure itself, pointing out how, quote, it's so much easier to dominate people who don't know how to access their own pleasure, end quote, which is related to what you mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah.
And I think truly that statement hits me just right. Again, all puns intended. Because it's just so true and it makes so much fucking sense. I believe it's such a bigger advantage for our oppressors to keep us in the dark and prevent us from accessing and exploring, and therefore fully owning our pleasure in all kinds of fields and branches. When we have our pleasure fully in our bones, when we know it, when we want to explore it more and more, and we access it with ease, then immediately we have access to even more power within us. That's what I believe in.
Absolutely. It's very visible in every part of the life that we live, right? We have standards that we're used to, for example. And if we suddenly find ourselves in a situation where we have to do it less than that, we know how disturbing it gets for ourselves. And we know then what we actually could have. So the experience of feeling better already means that we won't settle for less.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because if we have access to this pleasure and we know what feels best to us, we also how do you say, sharpen our radar, our instinct for what feels bad and what doesn't align with us in the process. So I think that's pretty cool,
Hmm.
and that's a goal to keep in mind, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, for sure.
So, moving on to the next chapter, which is titled Sex Magic, No One Told Me to Do It,
Yes.
which is a beautiful, beautiful poem written by Adrienne Mary Brown herself. And I interpreted it to be about self pleasure, masturbation,
Hmm.
and all the mind blowing, soul soothing, purpose fulfilling uh, revelations that can ensue from it. It's beautifully written,
Hmm.
it is intense, and I truly, truly loved it and engaged with it in such a warm and electric way at the same time.
Yeah,
What did you think of that poem?
loved it. Beautiful poem. For me also about the discovery and the practice of masturbation. And it also reminded me of the spirit of my own discovery of it as well. It was
Mm-hmm.
a solitary, secretive, intimate process that I went through with my body, and my body responding to me in a way that I never knew it could. Right, suddenly ejaculating the first time, it was miraculous, and I was like, "What is this?
Yeah.
Oh my god, this feels good!" And this beautiful poem really conjured that feeling for me again. Loved it.
Yeah. That's so nice.
Yeah.
That's so lovely. I think she really embodied really well what self pleasure and arousal and even orgasm, sometimes, if you want to reach it in that moment, can truly open parts of yourself that you didn't even know could be opened
Yeah.
or you didn't even know were there to begin with. And I think that's something that we tend to forget. We in society nowadays, even nowadays, which is, oh my God, so sad,
Hmm. Hmm.
we relate pleasure to something that is just a physical thing.
Mm.
I think it's evolving for sure, and we're more and more open minded and more mindful and more aware of what pleasure entails for each individual. But at the same time, I think we tend to separate the physical from the spiritual, from the emotional that relates to self pleasure.
That's a very interesting point, actually.
Yeah, that's what this poem kind of made me realize and made me reflect on.
Yeah, and now your comment on it kind of takes me a bit further when we will discuss the casual sex parts. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I will be able to reflect on that again retrospectively too when we talk about that part.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Have you ever had actually an experience during a self pleasure session that led you to such feelings of revelations, or as Kylie Jenner would say, realizations of things?
It is already a year of realizing things for me. Um, for example, like lately I've been really taking that practice that Adrienne Murray Brown suggested a bit more seriously, and
Ooh.
I've been making some nudes, some nudes that I don't send to anyone, some nudes that aren't for anyone else's eyes, and
That is so cool.
it feels really good, I must say. Like being actively in that process with my body and looking at it and realizing like what parts do I like to see, what parts do I like to show in a picture that will be a still image, how do I want to pose, and then I use the timer of the camera, and then I'm much more free with whatever I do with my body, and then like looking at those pictures, I get so excited and so fascinated by how beautiful I found myself, and I'm like, what the fuck, I'm so hot, and I even want
Yes.
to like send it to to my partner. I really
You want to
want to
send it
like
to a journal.
I just want to like publish it in the biggest magazine of Holland.
You would bless Dutch people with your hot ass.
I just love it, and I just noticed that it makes me feel so alive.
Wow.
And maybe this is a bit too early to say this, but I feel like certain paths to healing from some of my most difficult patterns that I've been battling with could be passing
Mm-hmm.
from this kind of a self-discovery, this kind of a self-contact with myself. this kind of an appreciation of my own body, you know.
That's incredible.
It's a bit too early to say this, but I can definitely already say that it has been making me feel much better.
Wow. I mean, I wish for you that this is the road, or let's say the result. I don't like the word result, but you know what I mean. That this journey is going to lead you to, because that would be completely incredible. That would be so amazing for you in every way.
Yeah.
Unlocking some doors.
Yes. Have you ever unlocked some doors with a certain pleasure experience?
Yes, I did. A while back, actually. And that was, I want to say it was so long ago. It was maybe 4 years ago, something like that. Because for a long time, I stopped self-pleasuring myself. For so long, for years, literally. And that was 4 years ago that I started again exploring my pleasure and what I liked. And at first it was really awkward and I didn't feel comfortable with it. I felt shame around it for some reason. But I kept practicing. I was like, you know what? This is supposed to feel good. Why is this not feeling good? Just look for something that will make you feel good and experiment with it. And I told myself if it doesn't work after a few weeks, I'll just stop and it's okay.
Yeah.
But luckily, one day I was just masturbating and I allowed myself to go to my furthest fantasies ever. And I think that's why I suddenly had this wave of well-being, I want to say, and I unlocked something in me that made me feel more confident than I had ever felt before.
Incredible. So you mean by really allowing your imagination to really go there?
Yeah, by going there and by allowing myself to feel pleasure with it and to reach orgasm.
What do you think was blocking the path between you and fantasizing about those fantasies while you were masturbating before?
Shame, probably. Yeah, shame, guilt, feeling like it was inappropriate in a way to have fantasies at all, or to be sexually engaged with myself and being a sexual person. I think that's something that I repressed for a lot of years. And I told myself, you cannot be this sexual being. It's not okay. You're a slut. All those things that I had been told in the past, actually, that was truly anchored in my mind. So I think that unblocked it, truly, to go to these fantasies, to allow myself to go on that path, to let myself feel pleasure fully without restricting myself, and then poof, it unleashed some unimaginable energies of confidence. Actually. Yeah.
Beautiful, because you have been then apparently denying a big part of yourself from yourself. And then you allowed yourself to just reach out and touch that part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. But it never happened again, so.
Time to take it even further.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, I'm definitely not giving up. I'm still going to keep on practicing. Let's move on to our next chapter, which is, drum roll, nipples are magic.
Ooh, yes. I love this. Love this. I love it.
I was waiting for your reaction because I know you and you know me. And we are both nipple whores.
Oh, we truly are. That's what it says on my ID. My is nipple whore Rukat.
Oh my god. Yes, that's your middle name. So as the title kind of gives it away, this chapter is about nipple magic. And Adrienne Maree Brown basically talks about her own experience with nipple pleasure and its evolution across the years, but also the taboos and even the ban that society has repeatedly put on nipples, more specifically women's nipples, to be quite honest, which in return, this whole tragedy of a taboo, it seems to have put a strain on a lot of people's relationships with nipples, whether they are their own or other people's nipples. I can literally get in trouble or even in danger if I dare let my nipples, even just one, by the way, be
Yeah.
seen or guessed through a piece of clothing that's a little bit sheer, or I can offend entire families on the beach if I dare to go swimming without a bathing suit top on. And
Yeah.
mothers, breastfeeding mothers, can be completely shamed in public for feeding their child, which, by the way, is one of the most vital needs of a human being.
Yes.
So I don't get the whole kerfuffle about all of
Ugh.
this, honestly.
Oh, that makes me so pissed when people object to like public breastfeeding. Like, shut
Oh,
up.
yeah, and even on
Ugh.
social media, people are so angry when a mother posts a picture of herself breastfeeding her child, and they're like, "Why are you posting that?" And it's like, just don't look if you don't want to see it. Nobody's forcing you.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's a weird relationship that society has with nipples.
And people, on the other hand, have been like sharing very violent images on social media, and that's somehow just fine,
Oh,
right?
that's such a good point.
Like, Rietveld people, sometimes some people that I followed would suddenly share a very bloody scene of a fucking emergency situation or whatever, just because they think it's interesting or artistic
Yeah,
or whatever,
yeah.
like without any trigger warning or content warning, and then that's fine. But suddenly seeing a mother breastfeeding a child on your feed raises so much rage.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack in that. Seriously,
It doesn't make any sense to me. Any sense.
no.
None at all. It is just, what the fuck? What the fuck? What the actual fuck?
Yeah.
Because
Oof.
compared to what we can see in movies, on television, even on Netflix, wherever, scenes of pure violence, scenes or people who say completely harmful things, very racist things, very homophobic things, very transphobic things, and so on. And it still airs, and nobody raises an eyebrow before putting it out there. But when it comes to a nipple, hello, everybody's panicking and saying that this is completely inappropriate and it shouldn't be seen by anybody. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not the end of the world, right? to see nipples. I don't think this is the most traumatizing thing that can happen to anyone.
I know, and honestly, oppression anchors itself in such illogical manners sometimes, like how it doesn't make any sense to us that a bigger breast that is attributed to a woman is suddenly such a big problem, right? Yeah. It makes no sense. But then again, it has a lot of course, white supremacist, misogynistic roots.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Terrible. It needs to disappear.
Yeah.
Nipples are magic. Read a fucking nipple.
Exactly. And that's exactly what Adrienne Mary Brown says, actually. At some point in the text, she says, quote, she says that, quote, it is rooted in a patriarchal rejection of anything associated with women's bodies, end quote, which is
exactly
completely proven further by the very common justification that, quote, breasts are too sexual for men to witness, end quote, and cue the eye roll.
Yeah, not only that, but also Brown critiques the sex culture created by and for straight cis men, and how the pornography of it is all about like pounding into cis and trans women's mouths and pussies in the most degrading ways, right? But also how the nipples and the areolas of black and brown bodies are considered less attractive because of the white supremacist beauty standards. And also like how that could connect to those ancestral memories of the mammy stereotype. And how much of these quote-unquote preferences are a result of the pervasiveness of white supremacy, that we often don't even know from where those preferences come to us.
Exactly, yeah. But outside of that, Brown also talks about the experience of nipple pleasure, which is wonderful. I love nipple pleasure, as you might have caught on to. And I wanted to ask you, what's your take on nipples being related to sensual and sexual pleasure, since it's usually not at the forefront of sexual intercourse?
Yes. I mean, when I first read this essay, I felt so understood.
Same.
Because nipples for me are literally an inseparable part of my sexual pleasure. Like without nipple stimulation, almost 60% of fun is lost for me. Seriously.
Yeah.
And this focus on nipples in this text was also then just really wonderful to read for me. It's not spoken of enough. I, of course, would notice in some porn that those people would also stimulate their nipples in different parts of the sex. But I've never really been engaged in a conversation that talks about it in detail or theorizes it even. And when Brown mentions how when they do get touched, it's often a brief cosmetic fiddling on the way to the capital S.E.X, right? And that's so true. Because it was that way with many of my sexual partners as well. And the most fulfilling pleasure I had has mostly been with the ones who also enjoyed my nipples a lot and made it an integral part of our pleasure together too. Yeah, my nipples are so sensitive like yours and are just such a source of pleasure for me that I even like wouldn't even consider getting them pierced with the fear that they might lose sensitivity.
Yeah.
That's the measure. You know what I mean? And I've always found it so surprising when someone would say that they don't feel much over there. And it's just another sign that like bodies and the pleasure paths in them are wired so differently from one person to another.
Yeah,
right?
so true.
And perhaps that's also the reason why there's such a diversity in the way people approach to nipple pleasure and involving it in sex as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's so true. But I love that you are so in I was gonna say in sync, in harmony with your nipples. I love that because I'm exactly the same way. As you know, we talk about this all the time, just to let the listeners know. Yeah, our nipples are sacred, honestly. Yes. I love nipple stimulation. It's one of my favorite things in the world, and I don't know what I would do without it.
I really enjoyed how with some partners my nipples has been like a key. They knew how to unlock that horny sexual box with me. You know what I mean? Like they would know that if their beautiful fingers would go around it, or if they give it a little kiss or something, I'm there. Like, even if I was not in the mood 1 second ago, I'm suddenly there. My nipples conjure the sex demon that I love that is living in my body. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is, right? I'm exactly the same way. You touch my nipple, you caress it a little bit, I'm ready to go. It is on, my inner slut comes out instantly.
You have me right there. Nothing can stop us.
Yeah, exactly. That's my superpower.
But I'm curious, have you ever orgasmed from nipple stimulation only? And if not, do you think that would ever be possible for you?
Interesting. Well, I've never had an orgasm from nipple stimulation only, but I think I almost reached it a couple of times when I was masturbating. But it's never happened. I think every time it almost happened, I got scared for some reason.
Yeah? Wow.
I would be like, oh my God, maybe because I have a lot to unpack, as you know. But
of course. Oh, of course.
Yeah, but I think there's a part of me that's like, you're supposed to have an orgasm through your through either my clitoris or whatever I'm doing in that moment, and not through the nipples. Or maybe I'm afraid it's not gonna be as good. But I don't know how it's gonna be for me, so I should just try it and dive right in.
I wish the best for you. I think it'll be great. Just go for it.
Thank you. I will, and I will review. Has it ever happened to you?
I mean, to be honest, not only by like nipple stimulation alone, but I think I had one experience where the pleasure, the majority of the pleasure came from nipple stimulation. Like other things were going on as well, but maybe like 75% of the pleasure did come from the nipple stimulation. And I love how I'm just like throwing around percentages like this. But yeah, you know what I mean.
Of course you are. Of course you're throwing percentage.
Yes, I know. But I also have to try it. I also have to try it with nipple stimulation only and see if that works out. Yeah.
Maybe with that sex toy that Adrienne Mary Brown talked about.
Yes, I wanted to talk about it as well because, oh my God. So she said it's the Jimmy Jane Form 2. And she shared a great tip with us that she repurposed it as a splurge of a vibrating nipple clamp and added to my shopping cart. I have to try this.
Express delivery, Amazon Prime.
Delivered tomorrow. Extra 500 euros. I'm ready for it.
I think it's such a clever way to turn your sex toys into whatever you need in that moment. You don't have to stick to their purpose. You can just change it around.
Oh, come on. As if you have been sticking to any purpose, Lucy.
Touché, my friend. Touché.
Ooh, all of this nipple talk made me really hungry for some nipple action. But okay, let's move on.
Well, right after this episode, we all know what Mayas is gonna do. It's no secret
Busted.
no more. Would you like to say anything else about nipples?
I have so much to say, but we can move on. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm done with this. We're done with this chapter.
Okay, cool. Amazing. All right, so let's move on from this wonderful, wonderful chapter into another amazing chapter titled It's Bloody Fantastic. And I almost said it with a British accent, but you know what? I'm not going to do it because it's going to offend so many people.
Oh my God, yes.
But so, as the title might have given away, this chapter tackles the often still taboo topic of periods, and particularly period sex, which, for those of you who might not be aware of what it means, it's the act of having sexual intercourse with a partner while one of them or both of them bleed. It's actually a very fun chapter, I have to say. It's non-judgmental while still being eye-opening and educative. And in this chapter, Adrienne Mary Brown lists and describes 4 different categories of people and their relationship to periods and period sex. And those categories are directly related to partners who would have sex with a person who's bleeding. So I'm gonna go over a little bit the different categories because I just found them to be really fun and very spot on too. Yeah,
but before we move on,
my personal experience,
I just thought that maybe we can also give a small trigger warning here because there will be a lot of talk of blood in this part.
That's true, yeah.
Its mention can be triggering for some, for certain reasons, of course. So please feel free to skip ahead a little bit. And if
Absolutely.
not, then just join us discussing the many wonders of period sex.
Exactly. I will leave you a couple of seconds. If you'd like to skip ahead, just skip ahead a couple of minutes.
Yep.
All right. So here we go. The first category is called Team Bloody Awesome, which is described as someone who's not afraid at all of period blood and actually is super down to have period sex while also caring for their bleeding partner. The second category is Team Bloody Fetish, which, as its name suggests it, references folks for whom period blood is actually a sexual fetish and who are more than willing to engage with it. Team Bloody Skittish is the third category, and it describes people who are not as down to have full-on period sex and would prefer to avoid it, but who are not fully against it either, maybe on day 3 or 4 and not day 1 or 2.
They're not in it for the swim.
You can put it like that, for sure,
who could still be down to fuck, but only after minimizing the presence of the bloody days, you know.
Yeah, exactly. They're down for a cute puddle and not a full-on ocean.
No.
And the final category is Team Bloody Faint, which gathers the folks who simply cannot or do not want anything to do with periods for a reason or one reason or another, whether sex is involved or not, by the way.
Yeah.
And as Adrienne Mary Brown says, this strong reluctance or even sometimes disgust toward period blood, might be related to a specific trauma or even phobia related to blood, which is of course completely understandable and okay, but it could also be related to something totally different and rooted in a, quote, male supremacist worldview, end quote, which strongly suggests that, quote, periods equal unclean, end quote. And yeah, and I think that's a really interesting way to explain it, and I think that's very true. And I had honestly not thought about it this way, even as someone who bleeds. And I was curious what were you taught when you were younger or growing up about periods, and was it ever explained to you? Did you experience it in any way in your surroundings, and what are your thoughts on that?
Brown's mention of this period equals unclean narrative was a great point in this text. I hate that narrative, and I hate how it's so permeated into language that in Turkish sometimes even people who do get periods say that they are dirty, you know. And this misogynistic stigma towards periods has always been so present in Turkey as well, while I was growing up there. And patriarchy really used everything it can to degrade femmes, you know, even such a natural process. That's so infuriating. And the last point Brown makes about the hypocrisy of the society is very direct and on point as well, right? When she compares like how blood of war is okay and embraced and glorified, or the blood of killing is systematically normalized, but part of a life-making cycle is stigmatized and regarded as disgusting, you know? That's really terrible. And I definitely noticed in Turkey that stigma around periods, and how even people who do bleed internalize that.
That's very true. Yeah. I think even I had this big stigma around it when I was growing up. I totally believed at some point that being on my period and bleeding meant that I was gross, that nobody would ever want to touch me in a sensual or sexual way when I was bleeding, and that it was something to be ashamed of. I would hide my tampons and my pads in my bag and go to the toilet super discreetly and try not to get caught, especially by boys around me, or boys would make fun of me for bleeding because maybe I had a blood stain on my pants and such. So yeah, I think it's just such a pity, but pity is such a weak word in that instance, that we don't teach people about periods in an accepting and supportive way. And instead, we just immediately put a label on it that just says gross, dirty, unclean, unworthy. So I think that's why it also resonated with me a lot, what Adrienne Mary Brown said about this perspective and the roots of the unclean period, quote unquote, stigma.
It's so unfortunate. It's terrible. It needs to change.
It does need to change.
It needs to change in the media as well. Period, pad or other period tools and materials for bleeding people. Also, the advertisements about them needs to change. A lot of them are really harmful.
Oh my God, yes.
The way it takes place in the media needs to change.
Yeah, that's what spreads the fastest, right? How it is displayed in the media. So, yeah.
Also, by the way, all the materials that someone who bleeds might need should be free. Should be paid by the taxes of the people.
Thank you so much.
I mean, why is that even a question?
That is something that is not even talked about that much. More and more nowadays, thankfully. But come on. It is so expensive. It should be covered by health insurance or whatever it is.
No question. I mean, seriously, it is a very natural part of the existence of many people, and this logic also should be extended to, like, we should pay for the oxygen we breathe or something. Like, it makes no sense that it's paid. It makes no
It
sense.
makes zero sense. And I
Yeah.
think they should also, in public places, I noticed that it's not very menstrual cycle friendly. Even
Yeah.
in airports, in restaurant toilets, it's not designed in a way to make people who bleed feel safe about changing their tampon, their pads, their menstrual cup, or
Exactly.
whatever it might be. And it should be in every toilet, no matter what.
Absolutely. People always have turned this into a comedic situation. You know, it's so misogynistic and it's terrible that they always say like, oh, woman's toilet is always full and there's always a queue in front of it, and women take a lot of time in there and such. But can it be because it's not designed in a way that would properly accommodate their needs in that space?
Yeah,
Like, why don't we
literally.
question that design then?
It's so strange to me that
Yeah,
it still hasn't been rethought.
yeah, exactly.
Redesign it. It's really not that complicated, and it would
Hmm.
make it so much more inclusive too, because I don't think it should only be about the design, because unfortunately nowadays it's very gendered. The toilets that we have
Yes,
in public
exactly.
spaces, more places are opening up and actually putting in place gender neutral toilets and toilets for everybody, which I find super awesome. But for places who have both super gendered toilets, I think both of their gendered toilets should be rethought and have a new
Exactly.
design to accommodate everybody, no matter what their gender identity is, and no
Absolutely.
matter what their body needs.
And if they really insist on having gender separated toilets, then men's toilets should also be able to accommodate period relief and comfort, because
Exactly.
there are bleeding
Yeah.
men and they should be able to use that space freely as well.
Yeah, it's to me it's just sad that it we're still at this point in 2021 where it's not accommodating for anybody who has this need.
Girl, I really hope that the new astrological era we're entering will help with that. Like, I hope it will accelerate this change, the speed. I hope it will
Yeah,
take some speed and, like, really go faster after this.
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I hope this message is heard by someone who can do something about it actively.
Hey God,
Wink,
it's me,
wink.
Day. Are you there? Yeah.
Did you have anything else to say about this chapter?
Yeah, I mean, I really loved how Brown described the members of the team Bloody Awesome in the way that she
Mm-hmm.
did. Like, how they give their bleeding partners multiple orgasms to relieve their cramps, or
Mm-hmm.
being prepared with expendable bed sheets, or, giving them generous time in the bathroom, and
Yes.
responsibility with the increased sexual risk of blood. And after all that, they get down, right? I just really loved that. And
Oh, fuck
I
yeah.
was asking myself, like, am I a member of any of this group? Because as of now, I'm not a member of Team Bloody Awesome, as in blood doesn't fit in my sexual life at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Mm-hmm.
still carries its connotations that makes me have difficulties with it. I might even be part of the Team Bloody Faint a bit. Not exactly, but the connotations blood has to injury, or more risky connotations about health and such, is
Interesting.
still alive in me. So, as if blood is still something to be afraid of, or bleeding as something that needs to be stopped, very anchored in me
Yeah.
somehow. And also, where I stand is, of course, is a different context. And Team Bloody Awesome also roots in the natural periodic bleeding of folks who menstruate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's in that context. I don't know where I stand exactly at the moment. And I am part of Team Bloody Awesome in the sense that when a loved one is bleeding, then I will provide all the relief I can with lots of care and understanding. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I also found the Team Bloody Fetish very interesting, like pulling tampons out with their teeth
Me
as well.
too.
And I
Yeah.
actually really appreciate how Brown mentions that the members of this team can be healing and normalizing, since the norm is so anti-blood. And perhaps,
Yes.
like, experiencing someone who's so eager to have this bloody sex with you could potentially be freeing in some way, right? I
Oh
really
yeah.
enjoyed that point. And not only in sexual ways, but in general, when we feel that our big insecurities turn out to be sometimes not even noticeable to others, right? That general situation, it can be some kind of a relief sometimes. Noticing that these
definitely.
insecurities that we really felt inside is not even like noticeable for some others.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I think that was very positive. I love that she highlighted this specific category, Team Bloody Fetish. I
yeah,
loved that. I honestly loved it. And I think it's something that should be more talked about, because I'm sure the folks who are part of this team might have some shame around it for some,
yeah,
or
I can
might
imagine.
not. Yeah, exactly. They might not
Mhm.
even want to talk about it to their partner at first, but I think Team Bloody Fetish is bloody awesome.
Absolutely, 100%.
So, well, come out, my little vampires.
Exactly, love it. Also, with Team Bloody Faint, I think the word faint has a comedic connotation, right? Like fainting because of that. But indeed, the members of that team can be people with a specific blood-related trauma or phobia of blood as well, like Brown mentions too, which is also totally understandable and valid. And you never
Oh
know what
yeah,
people experience to become so afraid of something, right?
exactly. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. There shouldn't be any
Radical
shame around
honesty.
that. Exactly. Radical
Yeah.
honesty, radical respect of each
Yes.
other.
Beautiful.
Thank you for sticking with us this far. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. So let's move right along to the next chapter, which is titled Fucking/Having Sex/Making Love. Again, an essay by Adrienne Mary Brown. This chapter to me is almost a poem. I so fucking loved it.
Yeah.
I found it
Beautiful.
so beautiful and erotic and sensual and raw and vulnerable and honest.
Mm-hmm.
All of
Mm-hmm.
the things, basically. It's about sensual connection. It's about the many variations of touch, of pace, of relationships, of in the moment needs and desires. And I just loved how wide the range was of what Adrienne Mary Brown described and explored with us so intimately.
Mm-hmm.
The intro to this text touches on Adrienne Mary Brown's intention to challenge the beliefs that were passed on to her about what a quote unquote sacred physical, sensual, sexual encounter is supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
and look like and feel like, which is basically two people of the opposite sex in love with each other, committed to each other, and quotes, committed in the eyes of a masculine god, end quote, which I think is pretty reductive, of
Mm-hmm.
course. So I truly loved how she consciously chose to challenge that and to open herself to all kinds of physical encounters and relationships with an open heart and a very large curiosity. How did you engage with
Yeah.
that text?
Same, definitely. I mean, this Judeo-Christian narratives around sex that Brown mentions as well at the beginning of this
Mm-hmm.
essay. For me, back in Turkey as well, in a predominantly Muslim society, this existed, this kind of an understanding around it. And that the only worthy and good sex was between a husband and a wife, preferably for the purpose of creating a child, not for pleasure. And homosexual pleasure is definitely out of the picture. And I mean, the accusation of perversion was always around the corner. The word for perverse in Turkish, sapık, or perversion, sapkınlık, would be thrown around anything that is related to a bit of an expanding notion of sex or pleasure. People would call each other like that, even as jokingly, but sometimes jokes create realities as well. And I personally really can't say that I've experienced much pressure around that myself, but I know a lot of people did. I didn't take it personal. I didn't internalize it so much. I just always felt this attachment from that understanding. But I know
Yeah.
many people did suffer that. And this little text by Brown and glorifying other ways in which bodies can come together feels incredibly healing to me. I just love
Mm-hmm.
that. It's beautiful. And by the way, that hilarious footnote joke that she made You know, when she first wrote, like, enter me, grab me, fuck me harder than you have ever fucked anyone, anything, fuck me and call me names, slick slits, cunt fucker goddess, then took us to that footnote for alternative name callings in sex, such as capitalist, patriarch, hierarch, monarch, selfish, king, daddy, owning class. Stop.
That was hilarious.
I love her
so
so
fucking
much.
Hilarious. I love her. Oh my god.
I love her. This is hilarious. And I'm low-key turned on by this, and there's a lot to unpack with that as well. The fact that I want to find myself a capitalist owning class monarch daddy. Yeah, next discussion with my therapist. We have to discuss this.
Yes, you need to unpack that. But I think it's not out of the ordinary.
Yeah, right.
Unfortunately.
I love this. I love this text so much. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought it was so sexy, but at the same time, it felt like, I mean, I was blushing the whole time while I was laughing and giggling, while I was feeling all the things and imagining everything that she was describing. For our listeners, if you're not reading the book with us, just for that, please start reading the book.
I know. Brown has a great way of sensually expressing certain things related to sex and pleasure. Yeah.
Such a talent,
Incredible.
such a skill. Because it's not like an erotic text only. It's so much deeper than that. Apart from the sexiness and the sexual energy that transpires from her words, there's a lot of deeper revelations, deeper structures and messages behind all of that. So I thought it was just so fucking cool.
I think so too. Brown's sexual and erotic language is liberating. It's very hot, very sexy, but also very liberating. It's a political, sensual language, and I love that so much. This text was a great entry to a further discussion that takes place in the next chapter around casual sex, because Brown wrote in this one, she said, we don't necessarily love each other, but there's desire here. I enjoy your sexual company, your body in my hands. I enjoy what you do to me, and I tell you what I need. So good.
So fucking good. Wonderful. I just loved it. I'm in love with this chapter.
Yeah, me too. I have been underlining the pages wildly. Like, I was just really into it.
It's just so powerful, and as you said, it's liberating, it's healing, it's all the things. It's truly all the things.
Yeah.
I loved it. So please read it if you can, dear listeners.
But even if not, I want to then quote a big part of the last paragraph here, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
Because it's one of the most sensual texts I've ever read, and I'm really feeling it. Alright, so here it goes. Those times you want me to stand there while you look at my body through my clothing. Reach under my skirt to wring your fingers along the top edge of my pantyhose. Up higher to find the shiver of lace, the heat that waits for you. The heat you don't plunge into, but hover before, worshipful. Those times when you touch my nipples with the tips of you, fingers and tongue, until my back arches. Those times when I find the tips of you, fingers, clitoris, cock, with my tongue and lips, and stay still, letting you use my mouth. How slowly can you cover this territory? How much can I need this release? Sometimes I have had many releases in the erotic journey before you even see me naked. Before you tell me your mouth is watering for me. Before I get to feel you inside of me. Slowly making me a sea. Woo!
Beautiful. Oh my god.
Feeling feverish.
That was something. I was completely hypnotized. I was reading along as you were reading it, and I was just somewhere else. I was in a trance. I was...
I don't know what to say. I feel speechless. I don't know how to continue.
I'm shaking. I'm shivering. Woo! Damn.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it.
That was such a good little sneak peek, I think, and I hope it gives some of our listeners the urge to grab this book and dive into its pages.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was a beautiful way to also end on this chapter, I think.
Yeah.
And from there, we're actually gonna hop right on to the chapter you just mentioned, which is the chapter about casual sex, titled The Highs, Lows, and Blows of Casual Sex, written by Adrienne Mary Brown. And it's basically in interview form. She asked casual sex related questions to 5 different individuals of all different backgrounds, ethnicity, body experiences, and perspectives. So we have Gary, who is a 38-year-old black cis man. We have Leah Lakshmi Piepzna-Samarasinha, a 42-year-old non-binary disabled queer femme mixed Sri Lankan. We have Holiday Simmons, a 39-year-old black Cherokee transmasculine two-spirit person. And we have Maya Williams, a 37-year-old black queer cis woman mama. And finally, we have Samhita Mukhopadhyay, a 39-year-old South Asian straight cis woman. First and foremost, I love how truly diverse this group of people is.
Yes.
So, Adrienne Mary Brown asks multiple questions during this interview, and the first one that she asks is basically, how do they define casual sex? What's casual sex for them? And I found all of their answers super interesting, but I think the one that particularly resonated with me is Maya Williams' answer. She says, quote, "Casual sex is sex I have that doesn't require other emotional labor. Like, I don't have to care about your hard day at work or your relationship with your mom or a nightmare you had last week. I might care, I might not care, but I don't have to care," end quote. And I just thought that was such a spot on, accurate, and intelligent answer at the same time, because that's, I think, the way that I would describe it as well. Casual sex, sex that I don't want to say nothing to do with emotional labor, but that doesn't require me to practice more emotional labor than necessary.
Yeah.
I was curious which answer resonated the most with you.
I mean, Maya's definitely did, but also there was a little difficulty for me in that part as well. I mean, I get it when she says she might care, might not care, but doesn't have to care, you know? Maybe the intensity of the emotional labor there needs some nuance here a little bit for me. And doesn't have to be a binary between having to care or not care. You know, like what if I kinda care and kinda don't? Like there, maybe her answer also actually accommodates that too. I mean, yeah, definitely.
I think
this
it does,
answer was,
yeah.
It made sense for me as well. With, for example, Gary's answer saying like it's one night stands, random hookups, sex with a fuck buddy, and sexual activity with a stranger or someone with whom I'm not romantically involved. And then Leah takes it over and then says it describes it as something happening outside of an ongoing relationship or a desire for an ongoing relationship. Sex where the connection is mostly about the sex itself. So only after reading these two responses, the question that came to my mind was like, what if the connection is indeed mostly about the sex, but it's not casual, as in not definable by the dynamics of being strangers or fuck buddies or one night stands, but also not a deeper romantic involvement as well. Now, I know it sounds a bit confusing to me as well, but I feel that there is an even more nuanced area somewhere that I hope I can express better as we move further with it.
Okay, interesting. I'm really curious what your take is.
I had it with the answer of Holiday Simmons as well, when he also complicated it, defining it even further by saying like, there might be appreciation/love feelings, but not necessarily romance. So, like friends with benefits can have casual sex because it's not romantic sex, he says. But then I'm like, what is romantic sex and what are feelings? You know, it gets so complicated. It's difficult. So coming back to your question to me, I think the thing that mostly resonated with me was the answer of Samhita Mukhopadhyay when she said that she doesn't like the term casual sex because sex is not casual, it's just sex. And something began to fit with me after that. And it is sex, it's fucking sex. But I understand the need for branching out and detailing and defining in micro levels. But I guess my problem is specifically with the word casual and its implications.
Yeah.
I love it when she says, like, I wish we could just call it, I don't know, something that might denote both the lack of traditional relationship structures paired with being a sexually responsible adult, not an asshole. Maybe we just call it sex, she says. So I really think there's something that's leading me somewhere where I feel more comfortable with, definition-wise.
Yeah, I really liked her answer as well, but I felt like all of their answers were so valid and so educative in a way. I loved seeing their different stances, how people define it, how they feel it, how they approach it, or how they keep it at a distance. Yeah, I just thought it was super cool to hear all of them.
It changes for everyone.
Oh, for
and
sure.
That's also the great thing about Brown bringing together these people with very diverse life experiences, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing. It's just about sharing different experiences and maybe making your own perspective on it by taking little bits from each of their answers.
Absolutely. I feel like that's the whole point of Brown asking this question to all of these people, right? Because it's so difficult to define and it's so different for everyone.
It's also about how you experience it, what has been your experience of it, and some people are just not interested in it, and then they define it completely differently than someone who engages in it regularly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And then Adrienne Maree Brown asks them why they engage in casual sex. And personally, I found Leah's answer and explanation deeply interesting. She said that she uses casual sex as a way of healing from the traumas that she endured which were all related in one way or another to a lack of respect from other people towards her own boundaries, as well as a lack of freedom in her boundary building process, a lack of rights in her boundaries.
Yeah.
I think that her sharing her personal experience and her use of casual sex is extremely important because casual sex has such a bad reputation, especially when women practice it,
Yes.
because it is seen as unholy or not respectable or something. But in her case, it is a healing practice. It's about taking the control back over body and boundaries and exploring whatever she needs or wants to explore freely without agenda, without rules, or with rules, but that she creates for herself. And I love that.
That was beautiful.
But so, Mais, I was curious which answer or answers actually resonated with you to that question.
Yes, again, just as before, I had some parts that fit with me with some answers and some didn't so much. For example, with Gary saying, quote, casual sex is uncomplicated, its singular focus is the here and now. It demands no commitment beyond the encounter itself, end quote. So I think, yes, I definitely understand the kind of encounters Gary mentions here. But I also feel like with casual sex, sometimes the focus can spread beyond the here and now. And it might demand some sort of commitment beyond the encounter itself, right? Sometimes we can also define it like that in different kinds of casual sex encounters. And I loved Holiday's words again, saying, quote, having casual sex is like a human experiment of desire, end quote. And I really appreciate that statement, as well as another statement by Holiday saying that it can be super intimate, important, and spiritual. And I really feel that. Yeah.
Beautiful. The group goes on to talk about the best and worst thing about casual sex, as well as what we as reader need to know to get the best casual sex experiences, tips, if you will.
Yeah.
To the question about the best thing about casual sex, Samhita responds, quote, casual sex is a space where you don't confuse emotional intimacy with the desire to get off, end quote. Which I found really interesting to have this separation and to kind of categorize in a way, or to use this separation in a way as a mean to protect one from the other. That's how I interpreted it. I don't know what you think about that.
Can you read that quote again?
Of course. Casual sex is a space where you don't confuse emotional intimacy with the desire to get off.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember. Samita's answer with that. I also remember Samita saying, quote, I know that we'd like to say all sex should be focused on pleasure. It should be, but sometimes it's not. And relationship dynamics are being worked out, or you are like mad about the dishes, so it's interrupting your flow. Casual sex is a space where you don't confuse emotional intimacy with the desire to get off. End quote. Just like you said. And this does speak to me a bit. I mean, with a longer term and deeper committed relationship, maybe there are more things to keep you occupied with when you are present with that person or engaging in an intimate and intense exchange, like sex, for example, right?
Yeah.
And with a more casual partner, maybe those things are just not there because they didn't even exist, didn't have a chance to exist.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. That's very true.
But also, I loved Leah's answer.
Me
it
too.
was really wonderful to me as well, because Leah says, again, quote, casual sex makes me feel connected to a lineage of queer sex radicalism, public sex, and non-married/committed sex. It felt radical to articulate that sex can just be about pleasure. It doesn't have to be about commitment, marriage, and the family, end quote. So the way Leah frames this answer connected to the queer sex radicalism in a world of heteropatriarchal monogamy really speaks to me. Queer folks really have been liberating sex and pleasure from the paws of heteropatriarchal white supremacist oppression. And I directly feel that energy that Leah is conjuring with this answer.
Oh, for sure. So fucking spot on. I also wanted to talk about the last question, the tips section, as I like to call it, because Leah emphasizes something really important, which is the practice of saying no, of changing your mind, of openly saying that you change your mind and just getting up and leaving, which is an excellent tip to remember and to keep in mind when it comes to practicing casual sex. And I truly believe it should be a basic knowledge and a basic teaching, but unfortunately it isn't. We rarely tell people or teach people to say no and to be okay with changing your mind, and actually you don't owe anything to the other person, especially if it's about quote-unquote casual sex. You don't have to stay just because you flirted and you felt good at that point and then you get back to their place and you just don't want to anymore. That's fine.
Exactly.
You don't have to stay. You can leave. You can say, look, I don't feel like it anymore. I'm gonna go home.
Exactly. But our socialization really makes it difficult sometimes. That's why saying no and getting up and leaving really requires practice, right?
Yeah.
Being able to say, hey, I'm not feeling it, I gotta go. Because we don't want to be rude, as if we owe the person, because of the time that we spent together, our body or the pleasure or something, but we actually don't. If two adults are engaging something with consent, they can always withdraw it and say, okay, it doesn't work for me anymore, so I have to go. And it's not rude.
No, it isn't.
And if someone tries to make us feel guilty about that's absolutely toxic. That has no validity to make us feel like shame or guilt about wanting to get up and leave.
Yeah,
that's really not okay, actually. That's really not okay.
I think if the person reacts this way, this is just a confirmation that you can leave, you should leave.
Yeah.
And I know that it can be really difficult to stand your ground in that moment, but as Leah says, it's something to practice, kind of like a muscle.
Very true. It is really like a muscle, definitely. What I also loved about one of the points Leah brought was she wonderfully brings the politics of desirability to the table in this last part, and how the most popular dating apps of the current times are designed to cater to the traditionally attractive and able-bodied people. And Brown adding to that the question, quote, how can an app capture the needs I have related to size and ability and even to post-gender desire, end quote. And the contemporary apps really fall short on these fronts, and they also don't really seem to care as well, right?
Yeah.
I love that she brought that up.
That's true.
Yeah.
Would you like to say anything else about this chapter?
No, we can move on.
Okay. So, moving right along to the next chapter, it is titled Confessions of a Queer Sex Goddess, and it is written by Adrienne Mary Brown, yet again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful title, I have to say. I love
Beautiful.
it. Yes. In this short
Yes.
essay, Adrienne Mary Brown shares with us how her beliefs about, and therefore experiences with, what society calls quote unquote gay sex. Society, as she experienced herself, tells us that sex in general should be centered around the penis and that quote-unquote gay sex is abnormal, shameful, and sometimes they even go as far as to say it's evil, when really it's just sex. It's an exchange of energy and pleasure, and it's a playground for bodies. Adrienne Mary Brown goes on to rightfully point out how, quote, that whole limited way of thinking is evidence of patriarchy, heteronormativity, and the moralistic efforts to control what happens in our bedrooms, end quote. Yes, what did you think of that statement?
Oh, so much of internalized homophobia, transphobia, fatphobia comes from all of that, and deep gender social conditioning. Even when she states like how calling gay sex, like quote unquote gay sex, stems from a heteronormative mindset, when it's actually just sex. But as Brown says, it's been politically attacked. That's the reason. But after all, I really love this small statement from Brown, quote, "We are in an era of rejecting the rigidity and lies of authoritarian systems that aim to separate us from listening to the wisdom of our bodies in order to control us." And, end quote, mind you, this was written before the great Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. So, bitches better beware. Things are going to change, and they will change fast. I love that. I love how Adrienne Mary Brown is bringing this statement from beyond that conjunction. You know?
Yeah.
Ooh, I love that so much.
Fuck yeah. So strong. But indeed, related to the first quotes that I shared, I think it's so obvious and yet so not shared as widely that the oppressors who have most, if not all, of the control over society purposely want us to fear difference or what they deem to be different, by the way.
Yeah.
So they carve difference in every single thing that they deem abnormal or shameful or bothersome or different. And in doing so, they carve this difference-hating pattern or difference-rejecting formula into us as a power-grabbing move from them. These practices affect us all the way to our sexual preferences, our sexual biases, our curiosity, what we do in our bedroom. It's kind of unbelievable to me that it goes to that extent, this manipulation and overly thirsty, power-hungry practices.
Absolutely, and how deep we allow them in.
Yeah.
Like, right into our bedrooms. What? Why? And when did that start?
I don't know. It started so long ago, and it's the most shocking thing to me is that I think most of us don't even realize when that happens.
Yeah. It just reminds me like how these oppressive forces enter into the most private and intimate spaces in our lives. Like, remember recently, like last year, this Hungarian anti-gay politician was caught having a gay orgy, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like tasting his own medicine a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, why were you meddling with other people's bedrooms? Okay, how does it feel when you have it yourself, right?
Exactly.
It's just... stop it. I don't get it.
And that was also very strange because he was basically engaging with everything he stood against, right? Everything that he spread hate over. When really, he was part of it and he loved it and he was too ashamed to do it publicly. So his solution was just to keep secrecy of his own preferences and spew unbelievable hate over what he loves, which is such a strange dynamic, right?
It is very strange. It is very interesting also. It is a case study. It should be a case study because...
Yeah.
I read somewhere recently, there's desire hidden in any expression of hatred. There's longing somewhere. There's lacking somewhere.
That's very interesting. I think it proves to be true in a lot of cases because For example, when I was younger, there was this boy, I don't know, I was probably 10 or 11 years old at the time, and one of my friends came out as gay, and this little
Mm-hmm.
boy started really bullying him and being super mean to him, and was just so hateful, which was so shocking even as a child to see someone with so much hate and rage inside of him. And years
Mm-hmm.
later, this boy, the one who was bullying, actually came out as gay as well when he
Yeah.
turned, I think, 18 or so. And he apologized
Mm-hmm.
to my friend later on, apparently, from what I've heard from him by message. Uh, so I think that's an example of this underlying longing hidden behind hate.
That's very true, and that's a very common situation that takes place with especially queer bullying,
Mm-hmm.
the bullying queer people experience. And basically, that boy was saying, "How dare you live your truth when I myself can't?" Right?
Exactly.
And I hope that person also healed with from like whatever oppression was keeping him
Mm-hmm. For sure.
in the closet. But also, I hope your friend who has been bullied is able to heal as well, because bullying
Yeah,
leaves serious lifelong problems with people.
definitely.
As someone who is an intense bullying survivor,
Mm-hmm.
I can say like, oh, like please stop bullying people.
Yeah,
It's terrible. Like it can be so terrible for the rest of their
it
lives.
can be very fatal too. I mean, bullying is such it's a
Yeah.
whole topic, and I don't want to expand this conversation too long, but I
Mm-hmm.
believe it's one of the things that can I think it's one of the worst things that can happen to people.
Yeah.
And eradicating this practice starts with the people who raise children, because I think a lot of the times bullying starts as a child. It's something that you discover at a young age, and it's about recalibrating. In order for the child to understand why it's wrong, someone has to tell him why.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
they're not told, or if they're not shown, even better, that it's wrong and that that's not the way to treat people, and that there's many other ways to express anger and rage and disappointment,
Yeah.
all of the boiling emotions inside, that would, I think that would help tremendously the entire world.
Yeah. Very true. Ah, I feel it. Yeah. Beautifully said. Oh my god, like where are we? Where did we come here from? And what's happening?
I know this is turning into a preaching slash therapy session.
Maybe it is a good time to move on to the wonderful
Yes,
text from Holiday
let's
Simmons.
do it.
Yeah.
So, actually, this is the
Yeah.
last chapter of our episode. So, it is titled, Are You There, God? It's Me, Day. And it was
Mm-hmm.
actually
Mm-hmm.
written by Holiday Simmons, who we have already encountered in a previous chapter. So, in this chapter, Adrienne Mary Brown introduces Holiday Simmons as, quote, a transmasculine, two spirit, Black, and Indigenous organizer and educator based in Atlanta. And it's through beautifully honest diary entries that Simmons takes us along his journey and experiences between October 2012 until January 2017. In that way, we are taken on an intimate ride from the time when he used dating apps to date and also to try and find a potential sperm donor slash lover, all the way to his
Mm-hmm.
life after being on testosterone for 2 years and experimenting with dating at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
I loved this chapter, and I thought reading through his diary entries felt so incredibly intimate. It gave me a sense of closeness with Simmons. He gave us a rather close access to his experiences, his thoughts, his mindset, and setbacks and doubts in the moment. It felt like I was having kind of a live recounting of his life, which I found really beautiful. How did you engage
Yeah.
with this chapter?
I absolutely loved it. I love this section, first and foremost, because it really provided us with a beautiful self-narration of a transmasculine experience from a transmasculine person. And the entire text was exciting, it was humorous and wonderful, but also filled with vulnerability, and it took me on a ride of oh my God, wild emotions, really. Like when he came out to one of his online dates later as trans, how that person was so insulting towards him, called him a catfish and such, and that was intense, and that was really heartbreaking to read.
It was.
And back then he went on a date with this guy whom he called Mr. Outcast, who was this person who was really insulting, but also another one whom he called Mr. Streetlamp Sugar Lips. And Mr. Outcast's reaction to his coming out scared him from coming out to Mr. Streetlamp Sugar Lips because of the reaction, of course. And it's such a terrible world when people have to go through such fears about expressing their truth about who they are, right? And also like the moment when Mr. Streetlamp Sugar Lips misgendered Simmons and how terrible that felt for him. It was terrible. Like all of this vulnerability that he shared was precious to me.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt very honored to read through such vulnerability and honesty, and I think it can be very eye-opening for some people, and for others I hope it's comforting to read these diary entries. Maybe someone who relates to Simmons' experience, or who's going through it as well, or who knows someone who is going through it. I think that's wonderful, really wonderful.
Yeah. But there's also joy.
Oh, there's a lot of joy, yes.
A lot of humor as well. So funny. I loved his language as well. It has a beautiful writing voice, I think. And in the entry dated April 2015, Simmons expresses his joy after 4 months on tea and just 1 month post-top surgery, freely walking on the beach in just his trunks and being gendered properly most of the time. And I love that so much. I love reading that joy. It's beautiful that he made that joy visible as well, right?
Yes. It was a full experience that we got, and I love that he shared every detail with us, or I mean, I'm sure it's not every detail, but a lot of the details with us so freely, from the joys to the less joyful moments, to the sassiness of certain experiences, to the doubts and the changing his mind and pondering. I thought it was really, really cool to witness that, yeah.
But the story with Mr. Streetlamp Sugar Lips was cut abruptly, Lucy. I want to know more.
Me too.
What happened with him?
Me too.
What was the mystery about his past?
Yeah.
Like, when did Simmons decide not to see him anymore? What was the mystery? I can't live like this. I need to learn.
I was on the edge of my seat, and when I was cut out of this story, I was like, wait, what?
Mr. Streetlamp Sugar Lips is not mentioned anymore. And I'm like, where did he go? What happened?
What happened? Why was he so strange about his past?
Yes, exactly.
Why was he so vague? The
fuck? Wow, whatever it was, Simmons decided not to tell us on this text, which already says a lot. Oh my god. Yeah. Well, I hope that was not a bad experience for Simmons. And I hope in the future Simmons considers sharing the rest of the story with Mr. Streetlamp Sugar Lips with us.
Definitely. Holiday Simmons, if you're listening.
Please.
Please give us an update. We're nosy.
Yes.
Would you like to say anything else about Simmons' chapter?
Just want to highlight a sentence from Simmons before we finish. Hurt people, but healing people, heal people.
Yes.
Amen. I love it.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Truth has been spoken.
Exactly. But it's true, right? Hurt people, but
very true.
But healing people also heal people. And I think it's also it also speaks a lot, and it relates on actually something that Adrienne Maree Brown mentioned before in the book, but the importance of surrounding yourself with healers, but also people who are healing.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's a really beautiful connection there.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow, such great chapters. I love this.
Oh, I love this too. It was such a journey, honestly, because it went from sex and nipples and pleasure.
Yes. Oh, we went everywhere.
to beautiful experiences and insights on casual sex and trans masculinity and all of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Such a wide range we went through just now.
Absolutely. And now, if you excuse me, I have a business to attend with my sensitive nipples in the other room.
Oh.
Mm.
Oh, I
You're
know.
invited.
Are you talking to me or their listeners?
To everyone.
Of course, you slut.
Yes, I will share my OnlyFans now. I want to wait 4 episodes before I come out with it.
Ooh, stay tuned. We'll share the swipe up links in our Instagram
Yes,
stories.
I love it.
Before
Love
we
it.
go, I just wanted to close off this episode with one question briefly for you, Mayas.
Okay.
So, based on your own experiences and the knowledge that you have now, what would you advise to your younger self when it comes to sexual and sensual exploration?
Very interesting question. I mean, I think in these chapters also while reading, we got very precious advice from Leah, Gary, and other people that Brown talked with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, trust your instincts, like Gary said also, and really listen to your body and the needs of your body and the desires of your body, and then combine it with excitement, research, knowledge, and talks with people you trust. Perhaps be freer in the way you experiment. Be freer in the way you liberate yourself sexually and in the realm of pleasure earlier. Like get this shit done earlier so that I can enjoy better. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes, I think that's what I would say. Not so much. I wouldn't change a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, of course, there are things that I could have done better, and I would have tried to do them better.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful
Yeah.
advice.
What would you say?
I think I would tell my younger self that no matter what I want to experiment with, it's okay, and I shouldn't be ashamed of it, and that wherever my sexual exploration takes me, whether it's immense pleasure or immense pain, that it's important for me to express it to someone that I trust, and to, in order for me to keep a healthy relationship with sexual and sensual exploration. Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Beautiful. I really love this. It would be very helpful. And actually, I'm really happy that some sex-positive educational accounts on social media are already informing early teens about these things, about these advices that we would have given ourselves. And of course, I do consider us lucky for being children pre-social media.
Yeah.
Because we still don't know what's going to happen to these kids with this social media. But still, it's also lucky that they are exposed to certain education easier than we were.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
I think that's one of the beautiful things about social media. There's a lot that I don't like about it, but that's one part that I completely feel very grateful for, because it does give easier access to so much knowledge to younger people, if hopefully they can stumble upon it and not on content that is harmful, of course.
Yes.
Well, that was it. That's our episode.
Yes.
I had a lot of fun and I learned a lot too. And as usual, I loved discussing with you, Mayas.
I loved it as well.
Yes,
absolutely.
Wonderful. So thank you so much to every single one of you listening and joining us today. We hope you had a good time with us, and we certainly hope that you will join us again next week. And thank you so much to my lovely co-host for being here again.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this discussion.
Me too. So we wish you lots of pleasure and lots of love, and see you next week.
Yes. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye. You can find us on Instagram at Soft Edges Podcast for all of the updates and teasers about what's coming up next. Our beautiful music is by the wonderful Patrick Velinga, and our gorgeous graphic design is by the amazing Yuri Sato. Thank you again for listening.